Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report, and I'm always doing research on various nutraceuticals and learning more about how amazing they are. One of the most important ones we haven't talked about recently, we get back from back order now, we have no problems at all with supplying lots of it, is Samethyl. Samethyl is S-adenosyl methionine. Now, it's important. It's also present. Methylation pathways are in our life support, which is our detox formula. We also have the detox formula for toxic chemicals, which is xenoestrogen detox. Now, it's not just for estrogenic molecules or for women. It's for all chemicals. And NutriDefense, and of course, BioLVR. I want to talk about Samethyl for a minute, though. S-adenosyl methionine with trimethylglycine, 600 milligrams, is a little nitrogen sachet. They're little crystals that are lemon flavored. And whenever your body's getting rid of heavy metals, it has to actually methylate them. So you get methylated mercury, methylated arsenic, etc. So it forms and takes a molecule, puts it in an ionic state, and then grabs it and puts it into the bile and has it broomed out of the body. If you can't methylate, you also can't form digestive enzymes, myelin sheath in your nerve system. You can't myelinate the peripheral nerves. You can't detoxify many other chemicals that require methylation. You can't form tetrahydrofolate, which is the very powerful chemical that's necessary for the body to make neurotransmitters or to relax blood vessels generating nitric oxide. So tetrahydrofolate, we have, of course, the tetrahydrofolate reductase enzyme to convert folic acid. We have the activated B12, which 60 to 65% of people over 60 are deficient in B12, which you won't find on the typical tests unless you do advanced, like a Schilling test. You're not going to find it. They may even not show peripheral blood smear abnormalities. It's only when you do CNS testing or Schilling tests you find that. So S-adenosyl methionine and Samethyl, very, very important. So if you're detoxing, if you're supporting the detox pathways, and there's ways of actually measuring that. You can see it on the QRMA test. You can see it on a Genova Metametrics lab test called an Organix, ORGANIX, which is a urine test for organic acids. And it'll pick it up and show you that abnormality is present. There may be a genetic deficiency. It doesn't matter if there's a polymorphism. You can overcome it if you give enough of the right substrate or nutrients, S-adenosyl methionine. So if you're detoxing from heavy metals, which basically everybody in the Western world has heavy metals or radioisotopes now, you need to take our detox. BioLVR, be the first. Then I would move up to superfolate and powermethyl B12, and then I move on to Samethyl. Any comments on those for detoxing heavy metals? And of course we use our Chelor Max, which is the best oral chelator, and the Xenoestrogen Detox for chemicals, and NutriDefense, which is the anhydrous catechin, and the Green Tea Select. Turns out catechins are very good at grabbing chemicals. So the NutriDefense and the Green Tea Select are really important for doing that.
Yeah, the Samethyl, I really like that, especially if any of your listeners like to drink alcohol. That can greatly impair their methylation pathways and cause all kinds of health conditions. And so I would say that anyone who drinks alcohol should be taking the Samethyl daily. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I think that's very important. It's particularly poor anyway because people are constantly dealing with a constant load of free iron, arsenic, lead, mercury. You know, if they're working as a machinist, they're going to be exposed to antimony and all kinds of other nasties. Also the new isotopes, that the body identifies isotopes, it's going to try to neutralize it. One of the most important things is to get your own levels of minerals up so you won't absorb these isotopes like cesium 137 if you have adequate intracellular magnesium. So it's kind of a really important thing to have adequate levels of those particular things. For example, having adequate levels of the activated form of B12 and folic acid is extremely important, not only for your blood but your brain, for myelination of connecting the different parts of the brain, for digestive enzymes, for detoxification, etc., and for creating neurotransmitters to correct mood. We find the two best things for mood are Samethyl, number one, calm mind, and the third one is the use of the Pteridine 4, which is our BH4 biopterin. And of course your body makes BH4 biopterin naturally if you have enough methylation pathway support, which is the superfolate, powermethyl B12, and BioLVR. So your body will make it if you have enough. But I like the Samethyl. It's powerful. It's extremely important, and I think it's we've not been concentrating on it enough to kind of really explain to people why should they take Semesyl, and why is it a major marker for stress. The next area, of course, is deficiencies. The most deficient macromineral is magnesium. The most deficient micromineral is selenium. But there's all kinds of other minerals. So Vitamineral Max and Minerals Plus contain all the activated vitamins. They also contain all the TRAX chelated minerals. It's really important because if you don't have adequate manganese, you're going to have all kinds of problems with your mitochondria. If you have a low molybdenum, you can't generate nitric oxide. In fact, molybdenum is one of the deficiencies that you will not be able to tolerate even high altitude. It helps to block HAKE and HABE, which is the high altitude pulmonary edema and high altitude cerebral edema. HAPE and HAKE, it's called. Interesting, isn't it? So,
oh yeah,
nitric oxide, of course, the generation is the key to blood pressure. When people say, well, what's blood pressure? Well, just think of a garden hose, and if you're pushing ordinary water through, it doesn't take as much pressure, but if it's real thick, like corn syrup, it's going to take a lot more pressure to push the same volume through. So that's internal viscosity related to antibodies attaching it to proteins like fibrinogen levels, stickiness of the cells sticking to each other, forming a rouleau. It's called a rouleau formation under microscopy. Also, if the blood vessel's in spasm. So those spasms are primarily mediated by calcium. You can block it with adequate levels of magnesium. We have our magnesium glycinate malate, magnesium taurate, magnesium potassium citrate. Really important to understand that magnesium is a supermineral. And then, of course, you have to add it with potassium, so we have magnesium potassium citrate. Potassium levels can't even be adequately elevated. So what is blood pressure? Well, we start off with Supernox, Gamma E+, to repair those ion channels, Cardivite. We give magnesium taurate, magnesium glycinate malate. We try to reduce oxidative stress with Nutritrala, Regenerex, and Cell Detox Glutathione. And I also recommend people take the additional Minerals Plus, Vitamineral Max, because if you don't have adequate levels of selenium, and we have also selenium cruciferate as well. Blood pressure basically is a good example of what we call insulin resistance, because it means that you're going to have insulin resistance means you have more than enough insulin, but you got resistance to it. And that's what leads into the next topic. I've did a lot of research over the weekend on leptin, and we have a product called Leptin Metabolic. And there's a couple of co-products that work with it. One of the ones we haven't talked about for a while is LipoFlush, conjugated linoleic acid. The other is, of course, the Green Tea Select, the catechins, and NutriDefense that are very important to work along with it. So let's talk about these for a minute. They're really important to understand exactly what is in them.
Yeah, the LipoFlush is a pure form of conjugated linoleic acid.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that 100 years ago, when you'd eat cow meat, you would get a lot of conjugated linoleic acid in the meat. Actually, it was really healthy.
Right, because it was grass-fed, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, in fact, the fatty acid concentrations, there's a number of fatty acids, and this came out recently in a Blaylock Wellness newsletter, which I get as well. I always like reading those newsletters of other health professionals, and it reminds you of things you already knew, but then you refocus on it. You should not be taking what we call pro-inflammatory fatty acids they say are good for you. Soy, the old term was rapeseed, but what do they call it now? Any of these pro-inflammatory fatty acids are really, really bad for you. Let me just pull up the article here, actually. It's funny, I have it right on my desk. And what I tell people is they don't understand that if you're taking pro-inflammatory fatty acids, you're actually going to increase the inflammation. So you should use coconut oil. I like how Dr. Blaylock says it. He says doctors are too cautious. How about doctors are uninformed, and many of them don't want to be informed about the fact that they'll have to actually start applying aggressive nutraceutical approaches toward everything from diabetes to hypertension, combined with exercise and lifestyle changes, rather than powerful toxic polypharmacy. When we come back, I'll get those listed. Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report. Yeah, the other things that help to mobilize and normalize fatty acids, I did my research on leptin. It turns out that in skeletal muscle is most of the resistance to insulin. And it turns out there's a crosstalk between chemicals that the fat cells release called adipokines and leptin and adiponectin. These actual hormones are actually lower insulin resistance, but they become we call leptin resistance. So when you get resistance to leptin, your body ends up getting resistance to insulin. Interesting. What leptin metabolic does, it reduces resistance to leptin. So now your body is sensitive to leptin, so it not only shuts off the appetite, but it also helps your body's oxidative metabolism, so the GLUT4 transporter brings sugar into your cells. Your fatty acids, you don't have what's called fatty acyl-CoA, partially oxidized fatty acids inside your cells. If you do a biopsy in people, even a first-degree relative of someone who's diabetic, you'll actually find, even if it's a normal weight, 20, 30 years before they ever develop problems, you'll actually see little droplets of fat in their tissues. So there's a difference in metabolism. The mitochondria start utilizing fatty acids instead of sugar because there's a block in the sugar transport. So as soon as you get leptin sensitivity, the first thing that happens is you have more than enough insulin, your insulin resistance drops, your body starts acting much more efficiently, it burns off the fatty acids, the insulin receptors start operating more normally, and the receptor number increases, and the person is again an underlying factor for hypertension, because you end up with salt retention when you have insulin resistance. You end up with sugar metabolism problems, so you end up dumping once you're higher than the person's insulin output. For example, let's say their insulin output is twice normal and their insulin resistance is twice normal, their blood sugar will be normal. But when their resistance gets higher than their insulin output, then they start to dump sugar. And so, in fact, many people, even if they're not overweight, they've got lipid problems, cholesterol, triglyceride, HDL. It turns out the small particle HDL is bad, the large particle is good, and it's protective. In fact, it turns out it's only oxidized cholesterol is bad. You can oxidize cholesterol in a pan, like one of these big iron pans. Fats that are pro-inflammatory, like peanut oil, soybean oil, sunflower, safflower oil. These oils are what we call pro-inflammatory. Ones that are not are things like coconut oil, very, very good for you. Believe it or not, even butter is not pro-inflammatory, but omega-3 fatty acids are good. Things like walnut oil, things like that. You have to be very careful, because a lot of the recommendations are made by dietitians and nutritionists and doctors for years, because some of these omega-3, omega-6 type oils like peanut oil would lower cholesterol, but cholesterol is not the problem. It's oxidized cholesterol, because they've discovered in animal studies as well, some of them going back into the last century, by the margarine company, that oxidized cholesterol is the only one that goes under your artery walls. Non-oxidized cholesterol has no effect and will not form plaque. Interesting, isn't it?
Oh, very.
So having adequate levels of antioxidants like Power C+, the cell detox glutathione, Nutrimedical, which rebalances your body's system, makes it very hard for you to form plaque. So when a lot of time, for example, when they're chasing in a diabetic or pre-diabetic, because a large part of the population are pre-diabetic, they've elevated blood insulin levels, but they also have elevated levels of free radicals in their system. So long before their blood sugar takes off, because they used to think before it was just sugar. Sugar was bad at cross-linked proteins. But that's only one factor. The oxidative stress is the factor. And as you lower insulin resistance with things like lipoflush, which is conjugated linoleic acid, which you would have got 100 years ago if you had cattle and beef that was actually fed grass instead of grains. If you had not all these pro-inflammatory fatty acids are in salad dressings and cooking and everything. And a lot of the oils that they use, for example, in restaurants are sitting days or weeks even, and they're constantly heated, they're already pro-inflammatory, and they have become oxidized. When you oxidize one of these polyunsaturated fatty acids, they get very, very bad, and they oxidize your cholesterol as well, and they form unstable plaque. So a lot of the people that have heart attacks, it turns out about 40% of the people with heart attacks have low cholesterol. So this idea that low cholesterol is all you need to do, and you just take a HMG-CoA reductase inhibitor, is just stupid. It's oxidized fatty acids and oxidized cholesterol that cause the trouble.
Well, the oxidized LDL, there's a study that showed that had the greatest correlation between death than any marker in the public.
And we try to reduce inflammation. You see, we use things like our nattokinase, lumbrokinase, when the anti-inflammatories like curcumin. when you reduce vascular inflammation and you use things like omega fatty acids, like our Omega Supreme Krill. Just had a little bit of my water here. What happens is you tilt toward omega-3 fatty acids and anti-inflammatory effects. So that's pretty important, isn't it?
It is. I also would also add in the Inflamax product.
Yeah, the Inflamax is very good. It's an enzyme, and we use that along with our other factors to reduce vascular inflammation. It turns out one of the reactions to the chronic oxidized fatty acids is to create C-reactive protein. And C-reactive protein just indicates you've got oxidized fatty acids. It actually binds to leptin and inactivates it. And of course, when that happens, you lose the signal from your fat tissue to, number one, stop eating. Number two, the leptin would reduce your insulin resistance, so now you become more insulin resistant, then you start dumping sugar. So if you get enough inflammation due to enough oxidized fats, you're going to get a very elevated C-reactive protein, or the marker is called PI1, plasminogen activator inhibitor 1, which is even a better marker. According to Dr. Holsworth here in America and Dr. Sumi in Japan, that developed a nattokinase, which we carry. So it's also tied directly to blood viscosity, because when your inflammation is high, your blood viscosity is higher, so the blood acts more like corn syrup instead of water. So blood viscosity is elevated as well. So things like green tea polyphenols, like our Green Tea Select, if the amino acid L-theanine is important, which we carry, of course, in our Calm Mind, and carnitine. We have various forms of carnitine. We've got the ALC 1000 carnitine. We have the one basically for heart and muscles and blood vessels, which is the propionyl L-carnitine, called the IBS-care, IBS care. And we have the straight glycinated propionyl carnitine, called mitocarnitine, mitochondrial catalysts that help to the mitochondria, because it really is a mitochondrial dysfunction, where the mitochondria are being given fatty acids rather than going through the sugar pathways, and your glycogen stores in your muscle is lower than it should be. So people that are diabetic or pre-diabetic, their glycogen to fatty acid balance is out of balance. So leptin metabolic, lipo flush, things like our Minerals Plus, chromium cruciferate, antioxidants, like Nutrimedical, long-acting alpha-lipoic acid, and cell detox glutathione. These are all very important to stop oxidative stress, which is in North American diet. Welcome back, and so Clay, that's interesting about leptin, isn't it? In fact, I've got an article here. I'm going to post up some of these today so people can see them. The emerging role of adipokines as mediators of cardiovascular function. Meaning, basically, adipokines it turns out your fat tissue, your white fat especially, the kind that people identify, not the brown fat, which is around your internal organs that burns off fat. Your white fat, which is storage fat, is basically an exocrine hormone generating organ. And if it generates the wrong hormones, called adipokines, the wrong ones, it can cause inflammation. If it generates the right ones, like adiponectin and leptin, these are actually good. There's good hormones. The tissue, if they get resistant to it then, however, it doesn't hear the message, so it doesn't stop, it doesn't go to the VML nucleus in your brain to stop eating. It doesn't modulate and increase insulin sensitivity, so then your body switches back to using carbohydrates because there's adequate energy. So that's interesting, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a link between obesity and arthritis. I pulled up some of the articles for some research on our background product, leptin metabolic, and it turned out that the levels of leptin resistance, as you decrease it with leptin metabolic, you not only help to reduce appetite and insulin resistance, but you also reduce the cytokines in the joints. So they used to think that osteoarthritis was just degenerative, but in fact it's inflammatory, just a different kind of inflammatory arthritis. And of course I will use along with that the Tendon Mender Joint Performance, Collagen Max, and Inflamex, because you want to remodel the joints, and I'll also add to it Mountain Red Velvet. But the first and most important thing, believe it or not, is to reduce the cytokine levels, which is the leptin metabolic. And you can also help that along, as I said, by these other cofactors, which are using LipoFlush, extremely important. In fact, I recommend now, if people have arthritis, they take the LipoFlush or CLA, at least 2 soft gels twice a day rather than just 2 in the morning. And that'll help to mobilize their fat out of their tissues and reduce the inflammatory cytokine levels that are being generated by the fat cells. Because it's actually the fat tissue talking to the joints that tell the joints to get inflamed. Interesting, hey? So there's a crosstalk going on there.
3 grams a day, there was a study done with conjugated linoleic acid, and it showed that it decreased body fat by up to 20% over 18 weeks. So,
wow, that's a lot. 20% is a big amount, isn't it?
It is.
And what dosage are you talking about? 2 in the morning? Or are you talking about higher dosage?
3 grams. 3 grams a day.
3 grams, which would be like 3 of those soft gels?
3 caps, yeah.
Yeah, 3 caps. I'm usually recommending 2 twice a day. I find it easier to do it 2 twice a day. And I give a little higher dosage for a bigger person, a smaller dosage for a small person. Let's look at some of the other nutraceuticals in terms of how things are going in terms of the research background. When we give our Vision Max, each component of the Vision Max is very, very advanced in terms of helping stop the free radical damage in the eye. I get reports virtually every week. Well, I've had my cataracts and my vision was temporarily better, and then it deteriorated really fast. They told me I have something wrong with my retina. I mean, that happens so often because it's an inflamed eye. That's why the eye was inflamed in the first place that caused the cataract. It's not just glycation. We call advanced glycosylation end products. It's inflammation, period. And you've got to block inflammation. And I use a combination of things like curcumin, which is very good for penetrating solid organs in the eye, Inflamex, anti-inflammatory fatty acids like Omega Supreme Krill, Omega Supreme, Omega Cod Liver Liquid, which also has the fat-soluble vitamins, and phospholipids. And these are really, really important. And then we have, of course, a separate DHA, which is docosahexaenoic acid. It's also epigenetically going to turn on and make new neurons in your brain. It also turns off inflammation in your blood vessel walls. So DHA is important, and Nutrifos for building up your tissues of your body, which is phospholipids. So each of these has a different combination. When we see someone's uric acid high because they get gout, we'll give them Samethyl. We'll give them BioLVR and monitor their uric acid, which is what we call the uric acid or ammonia pathway. If they don't have enough, we give them more of the Samethyl. Usually 1 sachet in the morning is enough, along with the BioLVR twice a day, to bring down the uric acid levels.
For superfolate, too, wouldn't you add that? Superfolate,
very good, and superfolate is very important because it's basically a methylation pathway disorder. So superfolate 1 in the morning usually is enough. And B12, and you'll often find if you do a QRMA test, these people are constantly low in B12 or folic acid or one or the other, or both, but they're also show that they have a heavy metal load, because methylation is one of the main pathways for pulling out heavy metals. Vein-Away, this product is very important for protecting your blood vessel walls. But it's the walls in the back of your eye for retinopathy. The glomeruli of your kidneys. We can test not only protein, but microalbumin, which is a particular fraction called a low molecular weight fraction of albumin. And your that, and of course the other is ultrathiomin B1. B1 is very important for protecting the kidney from proteinuria, B1, and also carnosine if there's glycation, because a person has got problems with borderline diabetes or diabetes. And a lot of people, long before their blood sugar is high, their blood insulin is high for decades before their blood sugar gets high. And so elevated blood insulin itself will have effect on blood vessels as well.
So connected, huh? These are all connected.
Yeah, they're all connected. It's interesting how even doing vibrational platform exercise, because it affects cartilage, will also affect your leptin levels. So pumps your lymphatics, it does other things. Superfolate, let's talk about this for a minute. A quarter of the population has a gene SNP, so they can't convert it. But the rest of the entire population of the planet is exposed to dioxins and dibenzofurans. Most people don't realize, for example, if you cook Splenda, which is a chlorinated compound they put in many foods now, you release dioxin. Isn't that crazy? Dioxins directly block your folic acid conversion, your 5-methylfolate reductase enzyme. Regenerex, this is really good at NRF2 pathways, SOD, glutathione. It's one of our really top three again. Nutrimedical, Cell Detox, glutathione, and Regenerex. And of course, we recommend to get the extra selenium, which is going to be in our Vitamin Mineral Max and our Minerals Plus. We also have the separate magnesium, selenium cruciferate from cruciferous vegetables. But this is a really big, important factor in terms of how you protect yourself. And the same thing with radiation. People are trying to protect themselves from radiation. I recommend they start off with Nutrimedical, number 1, Cell Detox, glutathione, and Regenerex. Take our Nutriodine and protect your glands with, say, mitothyroid and adrenal support, because your thyroid and adrenal are the first to go if you're exposed to excessive stress or radiation. And we, of course, use the NIOSH N95 masks and NutriDefense and the catechins, which are in Green Tea Select, because they grab chemicals that are exposed. And the heavy metals, we use Keeler Max and our Ultra Zeolite to grab a hold of the heavy metals. And, of course, methylation. If you're trying to grab heavy metals, including isotopes, you want to have lots of sammethyl on board. In fact, what we do with firefighters when they're exposed is we actually would give them an intravenous bolus of sammethyl to pull out the toxic chemicals and heavy metals out of their system, and vitamin C. So we give sammethyl and vitamin C intravenously. We did this decades ago, back in the 70s even. And we would rescue people from very toxic exposures as firefighters to toxic chemicals and heavy metals, and pull it out of the system with the sammethyl. So, but we have much better forms now. You put just under your tongue, goes directly in your bloodstream.
Yeah, that's one profession that they have to have products.
Yeah, amazing stuff. I mean, we used it years ago in nutrition in the emergency department. The average doctor wouldn't use it on a daily basis to detox people, even though if someone has hypertension, they're going to have free iron, free heavy metals in their body. And they're getting under oxidative stress, which is why their blood pressure is up, and they're having coronary or other artery spasm. Welcome back, and we're talking with Clay about the application to our Nutrimeds. And of course, our Nutrimeds are the most powerful. When we look at our LipoFlush combined with leptin metabolic, we take it with Biotin Plus and the dibetaline. You use it with our Minerals Plus to get the extra chromium, vanadium, etc. You're going to change insulin resistance. And then, of course, I talk about vitamin VX, which is exercise, vibrational exercise. I get on and do 30 to 60 minutes a day on my high-energy vibrational platform, Triplanar Trimotion. And I have resistance bands that I use through one of those athletic gymnastic bars in the ceiling. So I can do every kind of resistance movement, calisthenics, with every muscle group in my body. And then, of course, I can do treadmill or swimming or other things, too. You have to actually get the antioxidants in. That's why How Does Power C is important. I recommend that people take at least 3 of the Power C twice a day. And for every one of the 3 Power C, you take 1 vitamin K2. I recommend everybody take an anti-inflammatory fatty acids, which is Omega Supreme Krill. I think our whole diet in North America is pro-inflammatory, very deficient in things like selenium, chromium, magnesium, manganese. I mean, it's a bizarre diet, and it's no wonder that we live at all. And considering the fact that we start to get sick in our 20s and 30s, and by the time we're in our 40s and 50s, we have a well-advanced illness developing. And a lot of time, it's shielded us because you say, well, why is someone hypothyroid, or they're getting cancer, or they've got hypertension, when in fact, we know darn well exactly why they have hypertension. They've got insulin resistance. They don't produce as much nitric oxide. You look at their pathways, they're having decreased production of ATP, so their cardiac contractility is reduced. And when you look at oxidative stress and metabolism, we know exactly what's causing it. It's not a big surprise. But the conventional doctors, what they'll do is they will not look at your biochemistry. They're just going to slap another drug on you. Before you know it, you're so sick from the drugs. They try to cover up the symptoms and never address the problem. They're actually killing you, and they're killing you with toxic polypharmacy. And that's why when we're teaching you here, and this is, by the way, for physicians too, because I get lots of physicians that come to me and they want to get well, having seen the light after sometimes the end of their career or near the end, but they're afraid to kind of upset the apple cart with their colleagues or with their licensing authorities that, hey, This is all published literature in the medical literature. These are all certified labs like Genova Metametrics, Doctors Data, all the different laboratories that actually can measure functional medicine, genetic tests like 23andMe. These are nationally certified labs. I mean, and PhDs, articles published in every kind of journal, from cardiac to diabetic journals to brain journals for people with dementia. I mean, we know what causes these illnesses now. We might pretend we're trying to theorize it, but we actually know biochemically what's going on there. Probably in sometime in the next 5 to 10 years, many of these illnesses will have a targeted gene therapy, and it'll be just like a one-time shot, and boom, your genes will be changed, and you will dramatically reduce at least some of the factors. But ultimately, you have to have the right nutrients provided to your body. If you've got a gene SNP, and for example, generating an abnormal lipid in your liver, you're still going to have the right fatty acids in your diet and nutraceuticals, because you have to have the right building blocks. And that's where, if you get inferior building blocks and you go to a company and think, well, they know what they're talking about, probably marginally, most of the companies. For example, if we're looking at things like our NutriComplete, which is, I think it's coming back out of back order. We had some problems with getting one of the other components, but it's really fantastic. I think it's coming out in another week, isn't it, Clay?
That's what I've heard. Yeah.
Now, the NutriComplete is the best red-green formula, but it also has goji berry. The top antioxidants we have are, number one is Nutridefense anhydrous catechin, polyphenol, and the other one is astaxanthin in our krill oil. And by the way, our krill oil is the only, I do mean the only, in large capital letters, krill oil that has astaxanthin. And the third, of course, is the goji berry antioxidant. Then you'll see all the other antioxidants are great. For example, in our Vision Max, we have bilberry, which is blueberry, and other antioxidants are dialyzable that don't get destroyed by almost anything. We have things like Nutritrol, the only long-acting alpha-lipoic acid in the world. And of course, people are under more stress. They're under electromagnetic stress from electropollution. They're under heavy metal stress from all the toxins in their food, from industry in China that dumps in our rain. Our rain falls on us with mercury and arsenic and other heavy metals. More international food, for example, is supplied by countries that still use leaded gasoline. Most people aren't aware of that. I mean, we buy food from such and such a country. They still use leaded gas. We wonder why when we do heavy metal hair tests or blood tests, we still find we get lead levels in people. We shouldn't be surprised, because they're using leaded gas in these third world countries. They haven't changed, even though we did 35, 40 years ago. Kind of interesting, hey?
It is, yeah. It also add into the cell detox glutathione.
Right, and the cell detox glutathione is very important, along with your selenium levels. If you cell detox glutathione is more powerful than the IV glutathione we used to give at our hyperbaric clinic in Denver. And of course, just taking oxygen. That's why we have mild hyperbarics. I tell people, get an oxygen concentrator. In fact, I get in for half an hour this morning just before the show. In my 1.3 atmosphere mild hyperbaric chamber. It's a vertical grand dive, and I turned up the oxygen. I think I was putting an extra 6 liters a minute into the chamber through the compressor, so it probably brought it up from 21 to 27, 28%. That's really helpful. It helps you burn off excess inflammatory fatty acids and cytokines. It helps you to perfuse tissues with oxygen that ordinarily are not going to get optimally, perfectly perfused. And it has a long-term effect as an anti-inflammatory, which means it's going to reduce inflammation. So no matter what health condition. So you combine them with our fancy nutraceuticals, like our antipathogenics, like Allicin Med. I tell people, if you've got a chronic fungal infection in your gut because you're a borderline diabetic, or you had dysbiosis and diverticulosis in the past, or you're worried about bowel cancer, it's always chronic dysbiosis. Just start taking Allicin Med every day. Take a capsule every day. Take probiotics, Living Probiotic, 1 twice a day, and Living Probiotic Ultra every second or third day. It's amazing. The Living Probiotic is so powerful, you can go to Haiti and you won't even get dysentery. So let's talk about these for a minute, and healing the gut with things like our Ageless. If you got colitis, start with Ageless. Take Cell Defense, Inflamex. Start rebuilding gut wall with things like our Collagen Max, which helps to build a splanchnic membrane and connective tissue throughout your body, and Mountain Red Velvet. So let's look at these for a minute.
I really like the Living Probiotic Ultra. I mean, one every other day. It's all you have to take, 100 billion human strains.
Yeah, it's really pretty amazing. It's a lot more common that people have yeast infections in their gut, and they may not show even some abnormalities in some bacteria, but they've got fungi in their gut. They got anaerobes in their gut, especially if they're a child and they've had too many antibiotics. They're going to have abnormal anaerobic organisms, and they're going to show up abnormal organic acids that can cross the blood-brain barrier and affect their brain, which will cause things like autism or Asperger's syndrome. A lot of people don't realize that everything's connected to everything else. So we need kind of a renaissance in medicine, because it doesn't matter if you're a plastic surgeon trying to do XYZ surgery. You want to optimize results. You want to make sure the connective tissues are good, and the microcirculation is good, and the collagen regeneration is good, and the ability to prevent infection is good, and the immune system is functioning totally, and you cover them with natural antipathogenics. A good example is arthritis. And we just did a bunch of consults recently, and I tell people, take curcumin cream and slap it on your sore joints. Take your curcumin tablets, the cell defense. Cell defense, 2 tablets at least twice a day, 2 tablets 3 times a day. Take your anti-inflammatory, Inflamex. Curcumin cream is pretty amazing, transdermally for topical pain, for joint inflammation, for abdominal pain, pelvic period pain, for headaches. You can even put it at the acupoints for migraines, over the anywhere in the body, the neck, the muscle spasms, nothing like it. Liposomal curcumin cream, transdermally, goes right through the skin to the joints, the tissues, and deep tissues of the body. Just amazing. Thank you, Clay. You have a great week. And I can't believe it, but we're getting through August. It's already approaching the end of the first week in August. It's the 4th already. I can't believe it. What I have to say this summer is, don't go. Don't go, August. Don't go, September. If we can put off Christmas for a few years, that would be good. Stay well, stay active through the holidays and through the summer. We'll be back in a moment with Ryan, and we'll be coming up in Hour 3 with John Moore. Coming up tomorrow in Hour 1, Jonathan Rothschild from Ecological will be on.